Her fiancé, whom she met for the first time today, was truly beautiful. When he approached her, he said he was glad to meet her and introduced himself. When the girl saw him, she thought Lucian Cardian was very handsome. After a short silence, the lady introduced herself and said her name was Feronia Lilac. The boy said he was very sorry that he had only now come to meet her. Because of the ongoing war, it was difficult for him to return to his homeland. Feronia said it was all right. He didn't have to worry. They continued to drink tea, and everything was really okay, because Lucian was the one who led the Empire to victory, the hero of the Empire, Lord Cardian. The one whom the Emperor recognized as Feronia's fiancé 2 years ago was madly in love with the protagonist. After that, went crazy and destroyed half the Empire. He was a minor protagonist. The novel the girl was reading was called Saint Estelle. Apparently, just being saint, I'm not enough, because the main character has too much charm, the girl thought. All the handsome men in the novel lost their heads to her, including Lucian Cardian, the hero of their empire. As the girl read the novel, she didn't understand why a man, other than chopping people into small pieces on the battlefield, would tremble at the sight of a saint. Even so, she liked the second main character, Lucian, better than the crown prince. And now it has entered the body of the very bride who the minor protagonist, having lost his head, will kill with his own hands. Lucian had loved the saint since childhood, but could not bring himself to admit it, because he was born with red eyes. Since ancient times, it has been believed that red eyes are the demon's curse. While still young, and he was knighted, and his merits on the battlefield were incredible. But people still whispered behind his back, assuming that he had gotten his power from demons. That was why he tried to avoid the saint. Lucian thought that even to admire her was a great sin for such a cursed man. He put up with his desire to get close to her. But when he learned that Saint and the prince had fallen in love, his suppressed feelings came out. But no matter how sincerely he expressed his feelings, no matter how many tears he shed, the saint did not accept his love, all because she had already given her heart to another man. Lucian was overcome with deep sadness and fierce jealousy. And then, to his surprise, demonic forces awakened in him. After that he lost his mind, and all those who hindered and hurt him, insulted him, he killed mercilessly. Among them was his fiancée, Feronia, who hid her contempt for him. She knew from the beginning that there was a demon in him, and now he's a savage bomb with a demon inside that could explode at any second. So the girl wants to break the engagement immediately. But this is impossible because it was arranged by the Emperor. As they drank tea together, the girl couldn't believe that the man in front of her was a time bomb. She looked at his face and realized he was clearly not of this world. Then she saw the scratch on his neck. The girl got up from the table and shouted, "You hurt yourself!" The guy replied that it was nothing and that she should ignore it. At this point, the girl remembered that in the story, Lucian could quietly heal his wounds. But Feronia thought that it didn't matter if he had such abilities or not. It couldn't be taken so lightly. At this point, the girl reached into her bag and started looking for something, remembering the words of a maid named Annie, that there would come a day when a lady would need it. And at that moment, Feronia found a Band-Aid in her bag and thanked her maid mentally. After that, the girl started to approach Lucian. He didn't understand what she was doing, so the girl explained that even small wounds needed careful care because infection could appear. After that, she put the Band-Aid around his neck and said it was holding up fine. But then she suddenly pulled back abruptly, realizing what she was doing, and apologized for her tactlessness. Lucian realized that Lady Feronia was not at all what they say about her. The girl was very surprised that there were some rumors about them. The man explained that he had heard that she was a very outspoken person and could even molest. Feronia thought that he must have heard that the Marquise's daughter has a bad temper, even if no one talks about it. The girl knows it's true. If the real Feronia was sitting in front of Lucian right now, and not a girl who happened to be in romance, she would be looking at him with a scornful look. But it's not like that now, because she's a convinced pacifist and good citizen who pities the second protagonist to go insane. After thinking a bit, Feronia realized that rumors are just provocative stories created by people. Besides talking, there was nothing else to do. Afterward, the girl asked, "Does it differ from what they said?" And she thought that it was even more than different, and not by 360 degrees, but by all 1.440. Lucian confirmed that she did not fit the description of those words and apologized for being misguided. The girl said it was all right. She wasn't offended, and thought to herself that he shouldn't smile like that because it was bad for her heart. Feronia realized that she didn't look at all like the cruel smile that had been on his face not long ago, and she noticed that she couldn't control the frequent beating of her heart. But she knew it was for the best, because the odds of being killed by the distraught second protagonist are reduced by 0.01%. And she could feel him slowly opening up to her. That awkward atmosphere that had been there at the beginning was now gone, and the conversation with Lucian continued more casually. At this point, the girl thought that now that they were more or less relaxed, maybe she should get down to business. Afterward, she put the teacup on the table and said, "By the way, have you heard yet?" The guy didn't understand what she was talking about. Feronia explained to him that their engagement ceremony would be held at her house in 2 weeks. The guy was shocked, but replied that of course he had heard about it. It's been 2 years since their engagement, but the ceremony was never held because Lucian was at war the whole time. As soon as the victory was announced, their father set their engagement ceremony date. He has been preparing hard for the same. This is the first official banquet Lucien will attend after winning the war. The man agreed with her opinion and thought it wasn't a bad decision. Whether he was cursed by a demon or not, Lucian was still the most famous knight of the Empire. And since he is the protagonist of the ceremony, it is natural that many people will want to attend. Father spent a lot of money to decorate the hall for the banquet, and sent an invitation to all the influential people of the Empire. Feronia said that some say that all the most influential aristocrats will be present at the banquet, as well as the saint. When Lucian heard that there would be a saint at the ceremony, he smiled stupidly. Feronia could see it all at once, for he had it written all over his face. But Estelle cannot find out about his tender feelings because he hides them. The girl didn't much like the fact that for fear of revealing his feelings, he continued to avoid Estelle. If Cardian had at least expressed them a little, maybe Lucian wouldn't have gone crazy. So the girl decided to help him. Feronia said that if there was a saint present at the ceremony, they could ask her for a blessing dance. The dance of blessing is literally the dance of the holy, and since it is not a direct use of the power of the holy, such as the healing of wounds, Estelle will easily dance with the celebrants. A regular dance with the bride and groom. That would be Feronia's goal. With one last long pause, the girl asked if Lord Cardian minded. Up until this point, Lucien has deliberately avoided seeing Estelle. But now he simply had no other choice. And it doesn't stop with a simple meeting. They meet each other's eyes, and take each other's hands, and feel the warmth that emanates from them. That's when Estelle can realize what feelings Lucian has been hiding from her. If all goes well, there could be a connection there. At this point, Feronia wondered if this would change the original story, and then realized that even if it did, she could earn extra points of Lucian's disposition. The girl realized it was a great plan, so she really hoped Lucian would agree. After thinking for a bit, the guy said that it would be difficult. At this point, the girl thought he was an idiot. She wondered if he was really sure he wanted to miss a great opportunity, so she asked why he thought so. "In fact, I like the saint very much. That's what he thinks, but will never say," suggested Feronia. But Lucian said that he couldn't dance. When the girl heard this, she was shocked and assumed he was joking. But when she looked at his distraught face, she realized he was completely serious. She hadn't expected that at all. It wasn't mentioned in the original. The prince who came out of the fairy tale turned out to be a handsome man who can't dance. If you think of it that way, it makes sense, since Lucian is an orphan. He spent from the age of 12 on the battlefield and was rarely present at banquets, so he was unable to learn to dance. At this moment, Lucian lowered his head and apologized to the lady. The girl didn't understand why he became so sad. Feronia said, "So he has nothing to apologize for. If there is what it is that a man is good at, there is also what he is not good at. In war you destroy your enemies, the dance of death, don't you? Even if he's not as good at receptions, it's no big deal. Let's teach her now." The girl praised herself for such an idea, and told herself to move in that direction until Lucian's feelings changed. Afterward, the girl said that he was not so rude as to refuse the sincere intentions of his bride. After a while, when it was already evening, the girl returned to her manor. When she entered the room, she realized that she was very tired. At that moment, her father came up to her and said, "There you are, Feronia." He then asked her how their meeting with Lord Cardian had gone. He understood her perfectly well that the first meeting could always be awkward. When they first met her mother, it was exactly the same. There was a constant dryness in his mouth from the Danil atmosphere. He drank 5 cups of tea, and looking at it, her mother asked if he was sick. Remembering this moment, my father laughed and said that perhaps she thought it was worth breaking off the engagement if he was ill. Feronia's father, Marquis Lilac, is a rare talker, but she wasn't going to just stand by and quietly listen to his speeches right now. She is so tired that her legs just won't hold her, so she replied to her father that they had a great chat. After that, father asked if Lord Cardian was healthy, no matter how brave the knight was, after spending so long on the battlefield. The girl replied that he was perfectly fine. When my father tried to ask her something else, she said that she was very tired, so she wanted to go to her room. After that, she turned around and started to leave. In the aftermath, her father shouted for her to remember that for the sake of her family, she must get Lord Cardian. The business of the Marquis of Lilac's family is bankrupt, with only one name left of it, and Lucian is a hero of the Empire with a fine future, favored by the Emperor. So Feronia was betrothed to a man she despised. The problem is that even after the engagement, Feronia did not hide her disdain in any way because of this. Father was constantly nervous. He was afraid that Lucian would someday get sick of it and break off his engagement to his arrogant daughter. When Feronia came to herself and lay down on her bed, she thought that he need not worry about it any longer, because before he broke their engagement, she herself would do it. And Lucian won't want to marry a girl to whom he's been forcibly betrothed. So we need to develop his relationship with Estelle, Feronia thought. She then called her maid Annie and asked her to bring the writing utensils. The maid agreed and said that she would bring everything right away. A few minutes later, Feronia sat at her desk, writing a letter for Estelle, asking her to dance the blessing dance with them. She wondered if it wouldn't sound strange and rude if they didn't know each other. But she was familiar with Lucian, so Feronia figured that, at least for that reason, he would listen. She then wrote a second letter, stating that she would arrive tomorrow for a visit at the mansion, and signed, "With a desire to dance with you, your fiancée, Feronia." At this point, the girl thought it sounded like she was emphasizing that she was his fiancée, so she decided to rewrite the letter. She wrote that she would arrive tomorrow for a visit to the mansion and signed, "From a friend of yours, Feronia, who wishes to dance with you." She liked this option better, so she sealed it in an envelope and told Annie to make sure he got the letter today. The territory Lucian received from the Emperor after winning the war is far to the north. When he is in the capital, he stays in a mansion. After all, he was about a knight favored by the Emperor himself. The next day, she stood outside the mansion and tried to reassure herself that she had nothing to fear, even though she had been on a slanted path for a while. But she was also the daughter of a high-ranking marquis, so she was also a beauty. When she entered the manor, she immediately saw Lucian. He said hello to her. At this moment, the girl thought that she would be met by the butler, so she was careless. She absolutely did not expect to meet him right away. Afterward, she noticed that the atmosphere around him was not at all what it had been when they first met. For her, who was so weak in front of second lead characters, much less handsome men, the sight of him was too shocking. Said he wasn't really used to wearing suits at all because they stiffened his movements. When he saw the way she was looking, he said that if she wasn't comfortable, he could change. The girl said it wasn't like that at all. She just thought her nose was going to bleed. He didn't know what the girl was talking about. She walked past him and said she liked the way he looked now. Mom thought he must have thought she was weird because of that. When Feronia looked around, she realized that the mansion was very large, but there were almost no servants. Even those who work here have dispersed. Afterward, she asked Lucian, "Can't you dance at all?" He replied that he could only cheer. Feronia said they didn't have to learn ballroom dancing specifically, because it would be a simple waltz, and it wasn't complicated at all, unless of course he wanted to be a dancing king in social circles. Lucian said he understood. The girl looked at him and said they needed to face each other first. She thought the bright red eyes looked like rubies. She didn't understand how people could say such beautiful eyes were cursed, and she kept looking at him. "Lady Feronia, it is necessary for you to stare at me so intently." "I'm a little embarrassed by your gaze," the boy said, embarrassed. Feronia told him that the most important thing at the heart of dancing is eye contact, so necessarily, then told him to get over it. He agreed. And afterward they looked at each other for a little while. Then Lucian said, Did you say to salute before the dance? The girl agreed and bowed to him. After that, she told him to take her hand. When he did, she thought that even through the gloves, she could feel how rough his hands were. Feronia said she would teach him step by step. It's a bit difficult, but let him not worry because Lord Cardian is one of the most powerful people in society. Feronia thought it was stupid of her to say that, but it was really true, even though the girl was rude, but she knew how a noble lady should behave. Despite and greatly mistaken for acting arrogant, during their dance lesson, Feronia would explain to him which foot should go next. When he did something wrong, the girl would get a little angry. After a few such failed attempts, Lucian was far away from her, and she didn't understand how that had happened, so began to explain that when he turned, he had to return to the first position. They practiced for so very long, and after a few days when they finished the dance, she said, "The music keeps playing after the dance is over. How embarrassing, isn't it?" He agreed with her. At this moment, Feronia thought that he had no sense of rhythm at all, moving like a log. He apologized to her, and said that he had never danced before, and didn't know how it would be better. He then said that it was not for him after all, so he offered to finish. The girl was surprised to hear this, and asked him if she had said she wanted to finish her classes with him. Feronia said that she offered to teach him the dance, so it's up to her to decide when the class ends, and right now she's not going to stop. It was amazing to her that he, with such a stunning body, moved like a broken wind-up doll. She knew they couldn't embarrass themselves at the engagement ceremony, since he was her favorite character. After that, they continued their practice. Here's a back-to-back, and at the same time a turn. At this point, she thought that all the time they were doing this movement, he was going very far away. As she turned around expecting him to be gone again, she was surprised to see him in front of her. People are capable of anything. His steps are still offbeat and far from rhythmic, but progress is noticeable, and her efforts were not in vain. When she saw him in front of her, she said he was good. He was surprised. Feronia replied that at least now it already looked like a dance. "You mean it wasn't like this before?" Lucian asked. The girl said that before it seemed like they were summoning a demon king from another world. She looked at him a little and said that they had done a great job and asked him if he was thirsty. She then suggested that they go and have some tea. As they were resting, Feronia looked at him and thought, "He's got juice. How nice. How nice to learn a little fact about Lucian that didn't occur in the novel." After a brief pause, Lucian asked the girl if he could ask her a question. She told him to ask. The man then asked her why she was helping him so hard. The girl replied that he was her fiancé. She wasn't going to listen to people who would say her fiancé was a terrible dancer. At this point, she wondered if that sounded too corny. Afterward, Feronia said, "Don't get me wrong. I didn't mean to say that I'm ashamed of Lord Cardian." The boy said he understood, for she was his friend. The girl remembered that he was talking about what she had written in her first letter. She wondered if he liked it. Lucian said that Lady Feronia is the second person to say that to him, so this letter is very important to him. The girl asked who was the first. He replied that it was Mistress Estelle. Feronia asked if the saint had brought him to the capital and helped him to become a knight. He replied that it was right. Lucian said that there was no need to ask that because she already knows everything perfectly well. Estelle, who rescued people from slums all over the empire, brought Lucian, who lived like a beast, to the countryside. She said that if she hadn't, he would have died. Under Estelle's patronage, Lucian saw the world for the first time for real. He learned to speak, write, wield a sword, and communicate with people. It was only natural that he began to have warm feelings for such a person. Feronia said that if she were in his place, she thinks she would love the holy man who saved her from hell. She would confess her love every minute, every second. Lucian said she must be joking. If a hateful person like him confessed, anyone would run away without a backward glance, much less a saint. The girl said that she doubted it, unless the saint had eccentric tastes. She then asked if he really thought a saint would do that. After that, Feronia said that one could go crazy with such news. But the boy did not understand this expression, and asked what it meant. The girl explained that he probably didn't know that because he had been in the war for a long time. It is now a very popular phrase among ladies. It is very often used to express admiration in a positive sense. Afterward, the girl said that she meant that no one would be offended if he confessed his feelings. So she told him not to run away from them. The guy said that she really was well aware of that. At that moment, Feronia thought she was well aware. so let him just do it. The next day when I arrived, I noticed it was earlier than usual, but that suddenly some guy came up behind her and said, "Here you are, Mrs. Feronia. I'll show you to the guest room." It was the floor. Lucian was uncomfortable with people, so he wanted as few servants as possible. That's why the floor was in charge of running the mansion and the servants. Though he is a faithful servant who has taken over all his master's work, he has one disadvantage. He knew the previous Feronia well. He's got it written all over his face what the hell this woman's up to. After that, they went to the guest room and the girl spoke to Paul. She said he might not believe it, but she was coming to help Lord Cardian from the bottom of her heart, so she told him not to worry. But Paul pretended not to understand why she was saying that. He distinctly remembered what she'd said 4 years ago. "I will never admit that a monster born of a commoner and cursed by a demon was knighted." Those were her words. So Paul asked that she say no more, that he trust her sincerity. By then he had already escorted her to the guest room and slammed the door shut. At that moment, the girl thought it was a pity. That was in the past. But now she was a big fan of Lucian. She suddenly realized that she was alone in the room, and wondered where he was. When she looked over at the couch, she saw a man sleeping, and thought he had fallen asleep while waiting because he had probably been practicing all night. Looking at the progression of his movements during the dance, it's clear that every day after she leaves, Lucian is still practicing for a very long time. She really wants to look good in Estelle's eyes. Thought that if he liked Saint so much, he should be braver and tell her so. Whether or not Estelle welcomes his feelings is another question. Feronia just hopes that the feelings he has been hiding for so long won't drive him crazy. Suddenly she heard a rustle and saw the man start to wake up. When Lucian sat down on the couch, the girl asked him how he slept. The guy didn't understand much about what had happened yet, because he was still sleepy. The girl asked him if he wanted to sleep some more. He said he really did. Feronia told him to sleep some more then. But when he realized who was saying it, he immediately woke up and asked the girl when she had time to come. Feronia replied that she had come an hour ago. Lucian apologized to her and said it was rude of him to greet his guests like that. The girl said it was all right. She could at least look at the beautiful things. The boy didn't understand what she was saying, so he asked her what it meant. But Feronia was embarrassed and didn't answer him anything. To change the subject, Lucian said that he must be looking disheveled, so he would tidy up and come back. Feronia said that was completely unnecessary and he looked great today. She then moved closer to him and said that, while he was sleeping, his hair got a little tangled. She stroked his head and said they were as soft and thin as spider webs, and that she was even a little envious. Lucian said she was saying things he had never heard her say before. She was surprised and asked, "Are you uncomfortable?" The girl continued to stroke his hair, trying to tidy it up. The day of the engagement ceremony had arrived. Everyone in the room fired up to prepare Feronia for the celebration. And so, when everything was ready, the maids looked at her and said that she looked marvelous. At that moment the girl thought that she was not that beautiful. But she was actually wearing an amazing dark purple-colored dress, and she really liked Sis Shen's style. She said that Annie had done a great job, and she would give her a bonus as well as time off any day. When the maid heard this, she could not believe her luck, and said she would be faithful to her for the rest of her life. Anne said that no one could take their eyes off her, and Mr. Cardian would definitely fall in love with her at first sight. At that moment, the girl thought that she did admit that she looked pretty good. But for a man with such a sad and undivided love as Lucian has, there are no other girls but Estelle. Feronia was completely gripped by worry about the experience of the face. She was therefore doing her best to cheer him up before the ceremony. As they sat talking, the girl yelled at him. Why would red eyes be a sign of a curse? Perhaps if that eye color is found in an ordinary person, but to a beautiful person they only add to their attractiveness. Lucian was a little embarrassed, but said he was grateful for such words, but not as handsome as she said. But the girl kept up and told him to look in the mirror for 5 seconds, look out the window at the floor. Don't be so surprised. I can see the squid too. If you keep looking at it, you'll see the floor again. So don't worry about it. So what is it now? Do you believe me that you are handsome? Feronia asked. The girl, of course, was sorry for the polo. But it worked for Lucian. After that day, he no longer denied the fact that he really wasn't bad. It seemed to Feronia at that moment that he was slowly gaining confidence. That was news she liked. Suddenly her father's voice was heard. He asked if Feronia was ready. The girl said that she was ready and would go out now. When she came out of the room, it wasn't your father you saw in front of you, so she was very surprised. She asked Lord Cardian what he was doing here, since it was too early for a meeting. Afterward, she said he looked great, and she too tried to dress up in her best, but she couldn't jump him. The boy was surprised to hear this, and said she was. But he didn't have time to finish, and Feronia didn't know what he was going to say. Lovely, beautiful, she thought he was trying to compliment her, but Lucian said she was just crazy. The girl was surprised at the compliment, but said nothing. A few hours later, the guests had already gathered. When Feronia and Lucian were together, he asked why she had laughed so much just a little while ago. The girl thought, "That's the one, it's crazy." It was very cute, but she said nothing to him. And when she looked to the side, she saw that Duke Estefan had also come. This surprised her, for he did not often appear at such banquets. She said that their engagement must be a very important event if such guests came here. She saw her father standing beside him, and thought that the Duke had immediately caught in his net. Afterwards she said that it was an engagement, because it was forced upon her by her family and His Majesty the Emperor. And she said that he had not originally intended to take her as his wife. So she told him not to worry about her, but the boy didn't understand what she was talking about. Feronia explained that even if a woman with a baby in her arms showed up during the ceremony and said he was yours. But before she could say anything, Lucian interrupted her, making him very angry. She said she meant for him not to think about her feelings, but to do what his heart told him to do. Feronia was very afraid that Lucian would not be able to open up to Estelle because of his sense of responsibility or guilt towards her, but she didn't realize that his face was very upset. But then suddenly the butler spoke and said that His Majesty, the Crown Prince of the Empire, had arrived. When the girl heard this, she was astonished. She didn't understand why he had come here. Crown Prince Calix is the real protagonist of the novel, and a rare idiot. He is the man who will make her realize how much he loves Estelle after she leaves him. Calix is a handsome man with tar-black hair and eyes, and a steadfast but contradictory temperament. When Calix approached Lucian, who said he wasn't here of his own free will, but was forced here by his parents, Lucian thanked His Majesty for his favor. Feronia stood between them and thought it was a huge pressure between the protagonist and the second protagonist. After an awkward silence, the girl greeted His Majesty, the great Crown Prince of the Empire. He, however, responded by saying that he had heard about her. In fact, the main male character won't pay attention to anyone but the main female character, so he treats Feronia like a weed on his clothes. But the girl had not expected otherwise. Calix then went on and said that he had heard that she had made a special request to the saint. Calix said she asked her to do a dance of blessing with Feronia and Lord Cardian. It is during this time that Calix acts like an idiot. His obsession with Estelle is very much on display. She wondered what he meant by that. Maybe the fact that it would offend the saint to dance with Lucian. At that moment, Calix looked at her angrily somehow. She didn't understand why, but she was even scared. When Lucian noticed the expression on the girl's face, he said, "More, Your Highness, I dare ask that you do not look at her with that look." In fact, in the novel, Feronia was not interested in Lucian at all. Therefore, the girl did not believe that now he said such a thing for her sake. At this point, the girl thought that 2 weeks of dance training hadn't gone to waste after all. She was really enjoying it. Calix told him how dare he speak to him in such a tone. A dog who swore allegiance to the imperial family. But Lucian didn't answer him anything, and they just stood there looking at each other. At that moment, the girl thought, "Hey, you two, I'm not going to die of suffocation right now, am I?" That suddenly they were interrupted by a female voice coming towards them. "Your Highness Lucian," said the girl. When Feronia turned to see who it was, she saw that Estelle, the heroine of this novel and everyone's favorite saint, had approached them. This girl with an unremarkable appearance, but with a wonderful character that wins the hearts of many. She is simply extraordinary, both inside and out. Not a majestic beauty with delicate features, but this innocent face that can't be hated, so sparkling with happiness. Estelle stepped closer to them and asked what they were talking about. When she stopped, she realized that it was rude of her because she should have said hello to the celebrants first. She then bowed and thanked the Lady Feronia for inviting her to such a wonderful celebration, and it was introduced that her name was Saint Estelle Shangria. Feronia stepped closer to her and said that she was the one who should be grateful that the saint had accepted her invitation. Estelle then turned to His Highness and said that they had not seen each other for a long time, after which she asked how he was doing. Calix said she remained as clumsy as a commoner and sighed heavily. Estelle was shocked. She said that she had practiced so hard but still looked ridiculous. She then added that next time she would greet them like a lady should. Calix tried to object, saying he didn't mean it, but the girl wasn't listening. She congratulated Lucien on his engagement. Lucien was silent for a moment. After that, he thanked the saint. His face looked very sad. When Theronia noticed this, she received him on the arm and asked him with her lips, "Is everything all right?" He didn't say anything to that, but just smiled. After that, someone's voice was heard. "Greetings, honorable guests, from the bottom of my heart. Thank you for coming to the engagement ceremony of my beautiful, elegant daughter, Feronia, and the greatest knight in the Empire, His Majesty's most trusted man, the Emperor, Lord Cardian. This hall has been receiving guests for 300 years, said Feronia's father, the Marquis. He said that the first Marquis Lilac, as well as his ancestor Richmond Lilac, were married in this hall. It was designed by Leonardo Doyo, a famous architect of the time. Leonardo used the finest Le marble. It shines even after 300 years. Sitting back in his chair, Calix thought, who was even asking about this, and why is he telling this tedious story? After a few more minutes of narration, he said that he would end his greeting with all of the above. All the guests in the hall were touched. As Feronia and Lucien stood together, the girl noticed that there were a lot of people looking at them. She realized that even if she didn't ask, it was clear as day in what they wanted to say. The daughter of a noble marquise is engaged to a commoner. Some will mock her because she gave up her pride, and others will pity her for linking her life to a cursed man. After some more time, the hour came for the betrothed to perform their dance. When Feronia looked at the man, she realized he was a little nervous and told him not to worry, for her lessons were not easy. Thereupon he held out his hand to her, inviting her to dance. When she accepted, she said that if there was anyone who dared to laugh at him, she would reprimand him. He smiled because he liked the way she said it. After that, the music started to play, and the betrothed began their dance. Some people were whispering behind their backs. One of the girls said that she knew that Lady Feronia danced beautifully, but this was the first time she had seen Lord Cardian dance so well. Her partner said that he was also very good-looking. The ladies laughed afterward. Of course, Lucien didn't become king of the dance floor in 2 weeks of training, but they were able to maintain their dignity in public. After a few more minutes of dancing, the girl said, "One last move. You remember you don't have to go too far away, just stay where you are." The guy told her not to be nervous and everything would be fine. After that, they started to perform their final movement. Because of all these attitudes, Feronia's selfishness begins to show. No matter what a villainous supporting character would do, it would never shine like the protagonist. But the most important thing for the girl was that she was happy with herself. After the betrothed made their final movement, then all the guests were ecstatic about it. When they finished their dance, Feronia said to her partner, "How was it? A little nervous after all?" The couple didn't answer her anything to that, only sighed. After that, the girl winked at him, which meant that they should make a bow. When they had done what they needed to do, applause could be heard throughout the ballroom. The Marquis said, "Oh, what a wonderful couple." In fact, on Feronia's birthday, the fortune-teller who named her said a wise thing. This girl will save the Empire from a crisis. Afterward, he said, "Didn't Lord Cardian save the Empire in this long war? That's what a couple bound by the heavens means." When Feronia heard all this, she felt very ashamed of her father. Afterwards, she told Lord Cardian that it had been a great dance. He replied that it was all due to her. The girl was embarrassed and told him not to flatter her. Afterward, the guests came up to them and began to say that this dance was beautiful, and began to ask when they were able to learn it. Some of them were even mesmerized when they saw this dance. At that moment, the girl thought that the first mission was accomplished. After a while, Anne approached Feronia and said that she wanted to invite her to the next banquet. After a while, interest in her and Lucien's pairing disappeared, and the banquet hall split into 2 factions. The first half were those who crowded around Cardian. Feronia could hear every sound from the crowd. "How nice to see you in the banquet hall. Please attend events like this more often." Someone said to him not to be burdened with such useless things. "How will a man who has spent my whole life on the battlefield have time for careless leisure?" Lucien is ignored only by the upper aristocracy, called a commoner, but not by the younger generation. On the second side, the atmosphere was 180 degrees different. The Crown Prince's admirers were crowded there. "For all your busyness, you showed unimaginable kindness by visiting this place to congratulate the Knight of the Empire. You are simply amazing," came the sounds from the crowd. At this point, the girl thought that if it wasn't for the protagonist, he wouldn't consider them for people. Feronia wouldn't be without fidgeting near the main character in front of the protagonist. She wondered if the people gathered there could see that they were being glared at. "Do you feel something boiling up inside? You're in complete denial that you like her. That's why you can't approach her," Feronia thought. At that moment, she noticed that Estelle didn't even pretend to notice him. The girl decided that he was doing it to hide his feelings for as long as possible. She thought that this behavior was strange. Even for a saint, this is too cruel. To come to such a celebration and wear such a horrible dress. When Feronia heard this, she choked on her drink. Behind her, two ladies were whispering. One of them said, "That's exactly what she takes the noble's engagement ceremony for?" The other said that she couldn't understand the commoner's skill at all. But then suddenly Feronia came up to them, and the girls asked if she agreed with their opinion. Feronia thought that she did not agree at all. The girl ignored the fact that she didn't say anything back to them. One of them said, "Did you hear that not long ago a saint entered the Crown Prince's room without permission? She said it was all right and she did it for the cure of his wounds. But isn't breaking into his chambers reckless?" The girl asked if it was promiscuity or mere ignorance. When Feronia heard them talking, she thought they were quite mad. How could they say such things about a saint? Actually, Estelle wasn't the kind of person who gets in here, hears words like that, and freaks out. The problem was not her, but the infantilization of the protagonist, and also in the secondary protagonist, who can go crazy at any moment. Feronia thought that she needed to calm down. Even though she was behaving rather frivolously, unlike the original, then she wasn't dead yet. Therefore, it was necessary to strengthen her position as soon as possible. After thinking about it, Feronia finally responded to the ladies and said that she thought the saint was a real good girl. She had heard that His Highness was not the kind of person who would tell that he was not feeling well that day. Even the court physician did not know his state of health. It was only the saint who noticed this, and went to His Majesty's chambers to treat him. Feronia said that a very generous and courageous heart, and she was not even afraid of the guard's threats. So the saint is the best. At that moment, the girl thought that she had never before been so grateful to have the blood of her daddy's chatterbox flowing in her. Except now. When the girls heard this, they just left without saying a word. At that moment, the girl thought that it was not at all necessary to leave so silently. Thereupon Feronia approached Estelle and asked if she could now ask for the dance, the blessing of which she had written about in the letter. The saint agreed. At that moment, Feronia realized that she had nothing to fear as long as she was near the protagonist. They bowed to each other as they should before dancing. Feronia said that since she was taller, she would lead in the dance. Estelle was fine with that. It didn't matter how terrible the villains in the story were. She didn't understand how anyone could say such bad things about such a wonderful heroine. When the music began to play, the ladies began their dance. Feronia asked if the words of those ladies had offended Lady Estelle. The girl replied that it was all right, and it was not the first time she had heard such things. Estelle has gone through every possible hardship like any main character. She has been persecuted, scorned, misunderstood, and drawn into conspiracies just because she is a commoner by birth, and yet she had to put up with it all. She had no choice because she is a saint. Feronia was shocked when she heard about it and said that even if she has to listen to it all the time, doesn't mean she shouldn't be offended and put up with that attitude. Just because she's a kind girl, she thinks it's inappropriate. Words like that only hurt, and you hate it more and more. So in such cases, I don't try to tolerate it, I get rid of anything annoying, Feronia said. When Estelle heard this, it was as if she glowed. She told the girl that she was the first person who had ever said that to her. Feronia wondered where she had heard that phrase before. By then they had finished their dance, so they bowed goodbye to each other. The girl took the saint's hand and said there was one more person she needed to do a blessing dance with. Afterward, she called Lord Cardian and told him that he should dance with the saint. He pretended not to hear her, for the thought did not please him very much. But the girl came up to him and led him to the saint. After that, she wished them a pleasant time and started to leave. As she stepped away from them, She realized what it meant for a father to feel when he gave his daughter in marriage. She looked at the two of them and thought they looked very harmonious. But when she thought about it, Calix walked up to them and stood right between Saint and Lucian. The girl was shocked when she saw him standing there. She didn't understand what he had come for. His Majesty took Estelle's hand. The girl didn't realize what was going on or why he was interrupting them. Feronia thought he was about to ruin everything, but at that moment, Calix's hand was taken by Lucian. When His Highness noticed this, he asked how he dared to take his hand. The boy said he would take his punishment later, and asked to be let go of Mrs. Estelle's hand. At this point, the girl thought that she should have considered that this jealous man might intervene at any moment. Estelle said she was fine and asked that Lucian let go of his hand. When the boy heard that, he was shocked, and didn't understand why she was saying that. When Lucian did so, His Highness led the saint away, and the lad was left alone. Feronia couldn't understand what was going on, because it couldn't end like this, so she started to climb the stairs upstairs. When Lucian saw this, he was surprised. In fact, Lord Cardian was really looking forward to dancing with the saint, so Feronia thought that she could persuade her to stay, for she cherished Lucian after all. When Feronia went out into the street, she saw guards in front of her. They immediately stopped the girl and said that His Highness had ordered that no one should be allowed to pass. The girl said she had something urgent to tell the saint, but the guards said they had orders and they couldn't do anything about it. At this point, the girl got even more angry and said, "Do you even know who I am? My name is Feronia Lilac, known throughout the Empire for having a nasty temper." Feronia thought that at least somewhere she could use her evil past, but the man said he couldn't let anyone through anyway. By then, Estelle and Calix had already boarded the wagon and left. When the girl saw this, she got very upset, sat on the floor and thought, what's the big deal? So much effort he put into training to not dance like a broken puppet. Lucian slept very badly that his face ended up taking on a gray hue. He didn't want to admit it, but you can't do that. The girl got up from the floor, then heard some footsteps behind her. She turned around and saw Lucian sitting on one knee in front of her. The girl hadn't expected such a turn, and she didn't know what to say if he asked her why she was in such a state. The guy just asked her if she knew how he felt. When the girl heard that, she didn't understand what he was talking about. Lucian said that it was so obvious, after all, that even he realized what she was thinking. The girl was in shock. She didn't understand where he was going with this. The guy took her hand and said with a smile, "Lady Feronia." At this moment the girl thought, why is he saying my name with such an expression on his face? But then suddenly, her thoughts were interrupted by a hand that touched her face. The guy said he'd like to know a little more about her too, and asked if she'd give him a chance to do that. A few days later, Annie came into her mistress's room and told her that she was back. Afterward, she asked how she had spent all this time. Feronia was glad to see her maid and asked her how her vacation was. The girl looked very disheveled and sleepy. Annie came closer and asked what was wrong with her, why the lady was in such a state now. The girl apologized and said she hadn't taken care of her hair for a few days, which is why it was like that. She's also a supporting villain who will never get the main character, even if she dances naked in a fertilized field. The maid didn't know what she was talking about, so the girl told her to ignore it because she wasn't awake yet. Afterward, Feronia asked Annie if she would braid her hair for her. The maid agreed, so the girl sat down on the edge of the couch. As Annie tried to brush her hair, she said, "I told the other maids to take care of you. What have they been doing all this time?" The girl thought to herself, so she wouldn't scold them much for it it was all Lucian's fault. Feronia still didn't understand what his words about wanting to know a little more about her two meant. Sure, Feronia is a beautiful aristocrat, but that doesn't matter, because Lucian has Estelle, his very first love, and it doesn't seem like Lucian's feelings for Saint will fade so quickly. After a short silence, Feronia told the maid that something was bothering her. When Annie asked what it was, the girl said that it wasn't something that happened to her, but to her friend. Suddenly, the girl realized how silly that sounded, because Feronia had always been a villain and never had any friends. So she quickly corrected herself and said that it happened to a friend of a lady she knew, and began to explain that one man is in love with another lady, but no one knows about his feelings because he carefully hides them. But then suddenly there was a woman who noticed his feelings, and this man realized it. "And do you know what he said to the woman who found out what he was hiding?" Feronia asked. Annie asked, "What did he say?" The girl said that he told her that he also wanted to know a little more about her. The maid continued to do her hair, and the girl asked, "He wants to get to know her better. And what do you think that might mean?" The maid asked if it wasn't just flirting. The girl shouted that it definitely wasn't. Then the maid thought that if it wasn't, then maybe it was just like he said. Feronia didn't understand what Annie was talking about. So the girl explained that he said that no one knew who he was in love with. But suddenly, there was a single woman who found out. So he was blackmailing the woman who found out his secret. With this he says, "I'll be watching you, so keep your mouth shut or I'll kill you." Feronia got up from the sofa, at which point she took her maid's hands and asked her how she was so clever. But Annie said the mistress was exaggerating. Now Feronia was definitively sure that Annie was right. And the reason was because the original had an aristocrat who learned about a person's secret feelings when he sought information about their weaknesses. And for telling everything to the saint, he parted with his life. That just shows how much Lucian didn't want his feelings known. At that moment, the girl remembered her telling him to confess his feelings. She wondered how he felt every time she bullied him. And then suddenly Feronia cried. She realized that she was in big trouble because of this, and she didn't know what to do now. Ever since she realized that the odds of coming to an ending she hadn't counted on were high, she'd locked herself in her room and hadn't come out. She didn't want to face, but reality was cruel to her. While she was sitting and resting, suddenly there was a knock on her door and said that Lord Cardian had come. This moment, the girl thought, why did he come? Didn't she say she was sick? If only the doctor she went to had told me she was faking, Father wouldn't have invited Lucian. That suddenly the Lord's voice was heard through the door. He asked Lady Feronia how she was feeling. At that moment she thought, does her father really want to leave her alone with someone who will kill her unbeknownst to her? Lucian said that if she didn't mind, could he come in for a moment? But the girl replied that she was against it. Well, I suddenly wondered if she was being too rude, so I decided to add that she looked terrible right now. It was a good excuse for him not to come in. Lord was pushy and said he would close his eyes then and asked, "Can he come in then?" The girl didn't understand. Why does he sound so unhappy? The girl hoped he wasn't standing outside the door right now, looking like an abandoned puppy. After a brief pause, she said that so-and-so could come in. He thanked and started to open the door. At this point, the girl thought that maybe she should just pretend she had amnesia. She wondered what he would do then. The moment he came into the room, all thoughts went out of her head, because she saw a huge bouquet of flowers, and then Lucian himself. After his head became visible, then she noticed that he was wearing an eye patch and asked, "Did you actually cover your eyes to come in?" The guy replied that he had promised her he would. Then he held out a bouquet of flowers and said that it was a gift for a sick lady. When the girl took the bouquet in her hands, she said it was too much for someone pretending to be sick. Lucian replied that pretending to be sick was also sick, and he was very worried. The girl asked if he couldn't really see anything right now. The boy replied that there was only darkness in front of his eyes. The girl was surprised when she heard it. It was because he was acting quite naturally, even with his eyes closed. Lucian explained that it was because of his intuition that made the war-hardened man battle-hardened. At that moment, Feronia thought that she still wouldn't be able to avoid him, to forever use this great opportunity and say what she wanted to say. It was too brazen of her to meddle in his affairs, and it wouldn't happen again. But she didn't say that. Lucian, after a brief pause, asked if she had run away from him because of his words that day. It seemed to him that his words had come to her displeasure. He should have put himself in her shoes before saying such a thing, so he apologized to her. "If anyone hears such a thing from me, of course they won't like it," he said. But the girl immediately interrupted him and said that it wouldn't happen because he was amazing. When the guy asked what she meant, the girl explained that she had already said that there was no woman who didn't like a handsome man, and Lord Cardian was a handsome man. The same goes for him saying that he wants to get to know her better. When she finished speaking, she thought that Lucian had convinced her, and herself, that she should avoid other people, but she didn't want him to think that way. The guy asked then why she didn't want to see him. The girl explained that they were already engaged after all, and she was a little surprised to hear such words. They had no reason to recognize each other after all. But Lucian interrupted her and said they had a reason. The girl asked, "What is it?" The lad explained that they were rebuked without their consent. It was for the sake of the relationship of His Majesty the Emperor and the Marquis of Lilac. But he wants a more sincere relationship between them rather than such a formal one. That's why he wants to know more about her. It was very unexpected for the girl. Feronia said that just because he came here would not have helped him get to know her better. She asked, what if he had seen something unpleasant and didn't want to marry her? She asked, would he have been able to break the engagement then? The guy replied that of course he would. A moment the girl thought that if everything went as it should, then she could survive. After that, Lucian started to remove his blindfold and said that he even told her that he could break the engagement. He asked, will she allow me to ask again? After a brief pause, he said, will you let me get to know you better? The girl was shocked to hear this, but she said yes. After that, he asked her what her favorite thing was. The girl answered that she liked beautiful and sparkling things very much. Afterward, he asked her what she didn't like. She replied that she didn't like the main characters who were unreservedly cruel to the supporting villains. The guy didn't understand what she was talking about, so he asked what she meant. A little embarrassed, she said she often talks nonsense, so she told him to ignore it. As the girl drank her tea, she thought she had no idea what he meant when he said he wanted to know more about her. Lucian, at this point, was writing everything down on a sheet of paper. It was already the first entry that said she often talked nonsense. Lord Cardian, do you actually think you can learn about me through these questions and answers? Feronia asked. He said that to some extent it would still work out. The girl replied that, fortunately, she agreed with him on that point. So, why don't we finish with the silly interview and try a joint activity? Feronia said. Guy didn't understand what she meant. She explained that she has one hobby that she really enjoys doing, and this way he could get to know her better. After they finished their tea party, they drove into town and went into a beautiful store with clothes. Lucian stood next to the girl and asked, does she really like it? Feronia said that she liked it very much. Then she explained that such simple black suits were in fashion in social circles this season. Lucian was standing next to her, wearing just such a black suit. The guy said she told him she liked pretty sparkly things, but he wasn't like that at all. The girl looked at him and thought that he looked very nice in a strict black suit, with such a shy expression on his face. Afterward, she said that the black suit was very much to Lord Cardian's liking. She would even say that he looks like an amiable gentleman with a spirit of decadent beauty. I also liked the light blue linen shirt he'd tried on a little earlier. The navy blue scarf matched his white skin perfectly. The look was perfect. She liked the riding suit, too. After all, riding suits are for people with perfect figures. She explained that when my father wore the riding suit, his potbelly, covered by the vest, looked so pathetic. She said that Lucian's belly looked gorgeous in that costume, so she liked this activity very much. Despite her father constantly cutting back on her pocket money when their income started to decline, the amount she had saved in a couple months was quite decent. After Lucian stood in the black business suit for a bit longer, she told the two saleswomen to pack up the suit and the clothes they were measuring today. As they approached the counter, Lucian asked the girl if she was going to give him all those clothes. Feronia said that was exactly what she was going to do. Otherwise, why would she keep him here for hours? He thanked her for her generosity and sincerity, but decided that perhaps he shouldn't accept such an expensive gift. Let's just say I like to give beautiful people clothes that match my taste. Let's call it joie de vivre, said Feronia. When the guy didn't want to object to something, the girl started begging him to accept it. And when he agreed, she became very happy. When they left the store while walking down the street, Lucian said, "It all happened so unexpectedly that I couldn't even thank you well. Thank you so much, lady." Feronia said that as a thank you, would he be able to fulfill another request of hers. She said that when he wanted to meet her, let him come in the clothes she gave him because she wanted to see him again in those fine suits. When he agreed, the girl looked at him and realized he looked really cute. "Come in those clothes because I want to take them off you. I wonder if I say that, what kind of face he'll make. My girlfriend." "Lady Feronia, what are you thinking about with that happy expression on your face?" Guy asked. Said it was nothing so special. She just likes me, Lucian thinks, about the banquet that is coming up in a few days. When Feronia heard this, she was surprised, for she had said that the Marquis's carriage was broken, and asked if it would be repaired in time for the banquet. The girl said that she thought it would be a bit problematic and she would have to rent a carriage. Lucian said that in that case, maybe they should go together. When the girl heard this, she was shocked and asked him again. "With you?" "Well, yeah, you can think of it as paying for clothes," the guy said. A few days later, Anne was helping Feronia get ready. And when everything was ready, the girl looked very pretty. The maid said she probably should have bought herself a new necklace and dress and jewelry. Everything was out of fashion. Feronia said that the family situation was not the best right now, and it was not such an important banquet to spend money like that. Just a tea party with noble ladies would be enough. After that, she said it was time to go because Lord Cardian must have been waiting for her. Annie said that he really treasured her, and Mart came and said that he would take her to the banquet. Feronia said that this was what a kind man he was, but the maid replied that the word kindness was not enough, because it was love. After that, they started down the stairs, and the girl told Annie not to even think about such nonsense. As she approached the front doors, the girl had some sort of ominous premonition and heard someone's voices. When she opened the door, she saw her father talking to Lucian. "No one has ever yet succeeded in winning my heart except you. I think you can only say that when you are young." "Ah, youth, it's a wonderful time," the Marquise was saying. When the girl came in, she immediately asked her father what he was doing here, because he told her he was going to have a lot of work to do in the morning. The Marquis said he finished everything early, and when he got home he found Lord Cardian there waiting for her. He thought he was bored, so he decided to talk to him. But his daughter was no longer listening to him, but turned to Lucian and asked if he was all right. The boy replied that of course it was fine. The girl apologized that the preparations had taken longer than she had expected, and if she had known her father was here, she would have hurried. Decided to change the subject and asked if she looked good today. He said she looked great. After that, the girl asked who taught him to be so sly. Lucian said that no one had taught him, but that he had simply told the truth. After that, he asked if he had made a mistake again. The girl looked at her watch and said that they should leave already because they would be late. When they went out into the courtyard, Feronia immediately saw a beautiful carriage in front of her, and thought that it was at once evident that the carriage had been presented by the Emperor, for it looked terrific. Without getting into the carriage, the girl thought it was even more beautiful on the inside. Lucian asked if she was comfortable. Feronia said that she could ride in such a carriage all year round. He said to have it located because they would be on site soon anyway. Lucian took out his piece of paper again and started writing something down there. "Lady Feronia has developed gluteal muscles, and it looks like you want to write down something like that," thought the girl. Then suddenly she noticed that he was not wearing the clothes she had bought him, so she asked him if he found them uncomfortable. The guy said he didn't put it on because after he dropped it off, he had to go to the training palace, and there was a very high risk of the clothes getting damaged. And he didn't want that because it's an expensive gift for him. The girl said she would then look forward to their next meeting to review those costumes. After a while, they finally did make it. When they got out into the courtyard, the girl thanked him for giving her a ride. Otherwise, she would have been extremely uncomfortable in the rented carriage. She said they would see each other later, but then suddenly Lucian stepped closer to her and started fixing her hairpin because it had moved out of place. The girl didn't understand why her heart was starting to pound so much over such insignificant things. Afterward, he told her to have a good time, and he would drive up on time. Afterward, the girl went into the hall where the banquet was held, but then suddenly the other girls started to look at her angrily, and she didn't understand why they were so against her. Some of them even whispered,